everyone, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I'm here with my very first wrap up of 2020, my January wrap up, and honestly guys, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of killed it. I read a total of 7 books for the month of January. I feel like I'm on fire. I finally, I've left the reading slump behind in 2019 and I just read so many books, at least a lot for me. And 2, I read so many books I really enjoyed across a variety of genres, and I discovered the new love of my life, audio books. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the video. So the first couple of books you might recognize because I read them in my 24 hours of reading, but to chat through them, the first one is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. This is one of the books I really wanted to read this year. This is book 1 to a very dark adult fantasy series following our main character, who's basically been set out for revenge, and she's trained as an assassin to essentially kill the people that killed her family. This is kind of a world that reminds me both of like Venice, but also Rome. Her family was once very powerful in this world, but then one day when they tried to overthrow the current government, they were caught and destroyed. Her father, her mother, her brother were all killed in this uprising. And through all of this, our main character Mia essentially barely escaped with her life, and also in the midst of this kind of made a bargain with sort of some dark shadow force, which fuels a lot of her abilities as an assassin later in life. At the beginning of the story, we kind of follow our main character as she's wrapping up her education with her mentor, and she's about to set off on a journey to essentially hone her skills by going to a very renowned assassin school. So a large portion of this book is actually Mia at kind of a school setting, but this is not like a YA, like magic school fun class to class setting. This is a very dark world. It is very gory. It's very violent. Lots of people die in very gruesome and detailed ways. This is also just like a very bold story. I describe it as cheeky. Jay Kristoff's writing is both like self-aware and almost in some ways like he's egging up this sort of dark setting to make it almost ridiculous in like a very satisfying way. There's also footnotes throughout this book as well, and I'll say the first half of this book I hated the footnotes. I skipped them. I did not like them. I found them to be kind of annoying and they kind of dragged me out of the narrative, but ultimately I did get used to them and I ended up by the end liking them. And I will say they definitely add to the story. They provide like world context, some additional world building, and they're funny often. But initially wasn't a fan. I really enjoyed the assassin school setting and all of the characters, and kind of watching Mia as a main character I found to be quite astounding as well. She's really like hold no bars, gonna take what she needs to take kind of main character, and in that way like I really respect her. Like she's gonna do what she needs to do, and sometimes that means like killing a bunch of people. And it's dark, don't get me wrong, but really entertaining, and you can't help but root for her at times. Ultimately, I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a really strong first book in a series, and I'm really excited to see how this world continues to grow, how this story considers to grow, given that the ending was so explosive and definitely one that I wasn't expecting. I'm just really interested to see more in this world, and I'll be definitely, hopefully marathoning this entire trilogy within 2020. Next book I picked up was Hand on the Wall by Maureen Johnson. This is the 3rd and final book to the Truly Devious series. This is a really beloved, at least by me, a YA whodunit style story. It follows our main character Stevie, who basically attends a very prestigious and renowned boarding school in the, the wilds of Vermont. There, her and a bunch of students are essentially allowed to pursue and study whatever it is they wish. They're all kind of geniuses in different areas. And our main character, Stevie, wants to be a detective. She wants to be an FBI agent and solve crime. So when she gets to the school, she has thoughts to basically solve the crime of the century, which focuses around the school, because essentially shortly after its opening, its founder, who's a very rich business tycoon, daughter and wife were kidnapped, and this mystery was never solved. So our main character Stevie has to uncover the truth around this, and eerily her life begins to kind of reflect what's going on in the past. Maureen Johnson, I feel like, expertly crafted a mystery series through 3 books. She reveals enough to keep you like really entertained, but you're also still kind of guessing the ultimate mystery at the end. She really is able to like make this a trilogy with satisfying ups and downs, which I really like, hats off to her. I also always loved the 2 timelines we're reading. We're following Stevie in present day, but we're also following all the characters at the turn of the century shortly after the school was opening, so you're kind of seeing things play out in real time and in the past, and when they begin to intersect, it's super fascinating, and I loved every second of it. Ultimately, I feel like this was a very impressive whodunit story. I felt like Maureen Johnson really crafted an engaging mystery with lots of like twists and turns along the the way. Stevie as a main character was fascinating to read from. She's so, like, she can see details that me, as a human who doesn't want to solve mystery murders, would never see in a million years. This also, you know, obviously made my heart race. I am a self-proclaimed wimp, so keep that in mind. But I loved this despite me being terrified all of the time. Though I wouldn't say this is like super scary. I have a very low tolerance, but it did, like, regardless of me being scared, I still wanted to read it because I wanted to know what happened next. And I feel like that is a real testament to Maureen Johnston's writing. And I just really enjoyed it. I felt like this third book was really entertaining. I didn't like it as much as the second one, but I felt like she really wrapped everything up in a really satisfying way. And I really liked it from page one. I read it in like one sitting in a 24-hour reading vlog. And I just thought like it really, you know, swept me away. I was immediately into the narrative and I wanted to know what happened next, which honestly is what I look for in a murder mystery. So I ended up giving this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. A really fun trilogy, would highly recommend it. Super good story. Top notch. The next book I completed this month was Daisy Jones and the Six, and this is a book I actually listened to on audiobook. If you haven't picked this book up yet and you're wanting to, listen to it on audiobook because I feel like it just elevates the experience of this story so much more. This is essentially a fictional biography of this very famous rock band, and it's basically comprised of a bunch of interviews that take place over different like sections of time. Essentially, Daisy Jones and the Six was like the most popular rock band in the late 60s. They released this album that's like taking the world by storm, and at the height of their fame and popularity, they disband. And you don't really know why, and the story is essentially interviewing all the members of the band, like an inside look as to what happened. This is a story full of so many different characters in the band, and going in I thought it was just gonna be about Daisy Jones, who is this enigmatic, beautiful siren of a girl that was like the it girl of the 60s, and I thought we were just gonna be following her, but it's the whole band as well as kind of her very tumultuous Civil War-like relationship with the lead singer of the Six, Billy Dunn. The reason why I loved the audiobook so much is because it's a full cast and there's so much great voice acting throughout it. I feel like it adds a lot of nuance and color to everything that's being said, because obviously like they're being interviewed and you can phrase things in different ways, which provides different context, and I just feel like because of that, it just added a lot of richness to this. I really enjoyed the narrative. I was sucked in from like page one. I took the long way home until I could listen to the audiobook more. I could not turn it off. I was entranced by all these characters. I was fascinated by this tale of a story. There was moments of like pure frustration. Daisy Jones and Billy Dunn, I wanted to like slap in the face most of the time. I found them to be fascinating because they are so artistic and genius, but also unbelievably selfish and irritating that I could not get past them sometimes, which I don't think is a unique feeling to me. I think a lot of people feel that way, even people in their band. I feel like this book also explored like different ideas of identity, especially about women in this time. I particularly love the story of Karen and her kind of talking about her own experience wanting to be a professional keyboard player, and all of her storylines I loved so much. Ultimately, this book like was so captivating from page one, and while sometimes I found the characters to be insufferable and sometimes the storyline to be a little too perfectly coming together, it was one I truly could not put down and took me by surprise, and the audiobook just like changed the game for me because now I love audiobooks, and that's definitely thanks to this book. Ultimately, I would give this book like a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I felt like the source material was fascinating. Music in the 60s was something that, I mean, to me, like, how can you not be fascinated by that? I don't feel like this book gave me the same amount of like depth and feelings. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, also by the same author, but I do feel like this was a highly entertaining and engaging novel, and the audiobook is where it's at, and I feel like if I didn't listen to the audiobook, I wouldn't have liked this book as much. I feel like the characterization would have fallen a little more flat, so I kind of have to take that into consideration with the rating as well, because like the acting was what put this so good in my brain, and it's gonna make a great TV show. Next book I'm gonna talk about is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This was such a delight for me, and a book I knew I was gonna love like immediately when I picked it up. Honestly, for a huge chunk of January and honestly bleeding into February, I've had this just craving for books that have this like deep magical lyricalism about them. They're kind of centered in this whimsical place. Writing is super flowery, and they happen to also be about books. There's something about this whole thing that I cannot get enough of right now, and it's just like magical fairy tale like style of books and writing that kind of was definitely kicked off by the Starless Sea. This is a story where we follow our main character that is one day just writing his thesis. He stumbles into the library to check out some books to read for fun in his dorm. He pulls a book he's never heard of off the shelf. He begins to read it. It's a story, basically different layered stories like through time, and he finds it really magical and really engaging, and then he gets to a chapter which is a moment from his own life, his own childhood, and this kind of sends him on a spiral to figure out what in the world, why does this book know about him? This novel is constantly referencing a place called the Starless Sea, so he begins to go on a quest to try to uncover what that is, and he finds himself in the middle of like all these dark secret societies of keepers and protectors and all of that, all centering around the Starless Sea, and it's like a library protecting stories and all of that shenanigans, and it's so beautifully written. Erin Morgenstern's writing is just like a lush garden. I cannot stop reading it. I love it so much. It's so flowery for like the sake of it being flowery, but that is something I do not mind and I actually love. I love a beautiful sentence. I love a beautiful metaphor. I love some symbolism, like give it all to me, and she definitely did within this story. This is also a book full of such lovely characters. Our main character Zachary is just so endearing and you love him so much, and it also is a story about like love in so many different ways. Like star-crossed lovers is definitely something she's playing with throughout this whole tale, and it's like also personified in like weird lore kind of ways and distilled down to even our like main character's love interest. It's so beautifully done and I just like cannot stop thinking about it, and I was so engaged from page one, and it's just such a lovely story. I obviously loved a lot of the books I read this month, if you didn't realize. This is essentially a book that's a love story to stories, using so many different elements from different books we've experienced in our life and kind of twisting them in unique ways. This is also about people literally sacrificing their lives to try to protect books through time and protect stories through time. It's so engaging and lovely, and I really want to read The Night Circus now because Erin Morgenstern's writing is like honey to me. It's so visual. I can just see this whole magical, multi-layered, weird underground Starless Sea place. But yeah, clearly I loved this book very much. In fact, this might actually be my favorite book I read in the month of January. It just captured me from page one and it just like fed my soul. So 5 out of 5 stars to The Starless Sea. It was a book I thought I would love and I was right, and I'm glad it did not disappoint me. All right, 4 books down. Let's talk about Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is a book I have been reading for forever, and I'm not gonna lie, I definitely got to a place where I felt stuck in this story, but then, inspired by Daisy Jones and the Six, I rented the audiobook from my local library and began listening to that, and it changed the game for me. That was how I was able to read the last huge chunk of this book this month, because the audiobook, super engaging. The magic of audiobooks for me when it comes to my commute is when I'm reading on a train, I can only read while I'm on the train, but all of the movement, all of the walking on and off the train felt so wasted because I have to put the book away, and often too when you're like crammed up around people, it's really hard to read a book. So audiobooks have just been such a game changer, and I can also listen to them at work if it's slow or if I'm doing something a little monotonous. So I'm just able to read and get a lot more of a story in day to day than I was previously. But this is a very beloved story that follows 2 main characters, Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell. They're 2 magicians, and this is set in the 19th century. This is definitely like a parlor room magical story. There's lots of talking, there's lots of politics, there's lots of disguised conversation and niceties. There's a lot of back and forth. Do not assume going to this book that there's going to be a lot of action. Do not assume that this book is going to go by quickly, in my opinion. While you really do like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and you're very engaged in their story, and you think this book is a feat and very impressive, in my humble opinion, this book was slow. I mean, I have to be honest, like in the beginning I was like, it's not boring. I love this book, but it took me 5 months to read a 900-page book. I read long books all of the time. Length in novels isn't really something that impacts the speed at which I read something, but when something takes me 9 months to read, despite, you know, obviously it's long, I have to kind of boil it down to like, how engaged was I in this book? And granted, I was picking it up, putting it down so often because it was my commute book. I still have to say, like, this wasn't one that I was like itching to pick up every day. I enjoyed it a lot, and I appreciate the writing and the story a lot. And I'm very excited to watch the BBC show, but ultimately, this is a dry book, and it took me a while to read because, frankly, It's just like, it's interesting and interesting things happen, but it just sometimes felt like a little bit of a struggle to read it. But I'm very happy I did read it because I feel like it's a very foundational book and it's obviously a lot of people's favorites book, but like it is a little boring. Like, I'm gonna be honest, it's a little slow and it's a little boring. And it does pick up a bit towards the end, especially because I love Jonathan Strange so much and Arabella and all of those characters, but like, still guys, this book took me a while and I just feel like I have to caveat that. I do think this book is quite a feat because I feel like it combines elements of like magic but really puts it in like a civil context of how it can impact government and war in like a very historical fiction kind of way. This felt like I was reading a history and kind of like recounting the true historical events of two magicians in England during this time period. So in some ways it felt very educational even though it was entirely fictional. So I do appreciate like its style. While there was definitely some really intense plot moments, it was something that I felt like did not need to be as long as it was. And I felt like it really could have been distilled down to a much more punchy story, but maybe that's not what they were looking for, but that's just my personal feeling about this novel. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars just because I liked it, I didn't love it, it felt long, know that going in. This is not a book that's gonna like whisk you away and like capture you on page 1. At least for me, it was kind of laborious to get through. Alrighty, so from there I also read The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This was a big goal for me in 2020 because I want to read many of Robin Hobb's books throughout this entire year. This is the first book to a very beloved series of series set within this world. And honestly, like, it's been something I've been meaning to read forever. I tried to read this book probably like 6 years ago. I never completed it, but I'm really glad I gave it a chance this month because I ended up really liking it a lot. This is the first book to the Farseer trilogy, and we essentially follow like a royal assassin as he's recounting his childhood in this first book. I'm pretty sure the entire trilogy we're gonna follow him throughout his whole life, but this first book really focuses on his childhood, his training, and his ultimate like ascent to becoming the royal assassin for the king. Because this so heavily focuses on his childhood, Fitz's childhood, I would say this book is a little bit slow in the beginning, but it's a slowness that I don't necessarily mind because I feel like by being so present with him as he's kind of doing mundane things, you're inherently going to begin to grow to love him so much. So as you see him become an adult and as we continue to encounter his adventures in books 2 and 3, you feel very connected to him. Fitz is a main character I feel like I know in and out, which I feel like is great because when things begin to kind of go a little quicker, you're going to love him and you're going to want to, you know his whole story from beginning to end. But that is something I want to caution. I would say like the first 150 pages or so, this book is a little bit slower, but kind of once things begin to pick up, learning about kind of the magic of this world, going through his magic training, his assassin training, and kind of just like navigating the politics of this kingdom was really cool. And I also just loved Fitz as a main character. Like, I'm pretty sure this is gonna be Fitz's story, and I loved him. I loved him so much. And this truly felt like a classic start to a classic fantasy story, which I always love. Hilarious because I read this, The Assassin's Apprentice, and Nevernight in the same month, and those books really contrast each other. They both follow assassins, but one is much more like cut and dry, like Fitz is like the royal assassin. It's dark work that he does, but he's like a very civilized person. He's like very involved in court life. And then we follow Nevernight where Mia's like drenched in blood and like running through the streets like a wild woman. Like, it's very different types of assassins, and this is definitely more a traditional court setting fantasy novel. But I'm really excited to see where the rest of the story takes off. I gave this first one a 3.75 out of 5 stars, basically for the reasons I just described. It was a little bit slower in the beginning. I had a harder time getting into the narrative, but ultimately I feel like that slowness will serve it in later books, and I do really feel very close to our main character Fitz, and I'm just hoping we see kind of like a larger political world, and I hear each book gets better and better. So I'm very excited to read book 2, really enjoyed book 1. Definitely a solid fantasy series, for sure. The very last book I completed in the month of January, I know, I can't believe I read all these books, is Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield. This is a book I've had on my TBR for so long. Years and years and years and years, and I've kept it over the years and not on hold it because I knew ultimately when I did pick it up, I was going to love it so much. Which, friends, glad to confirm, that is very true. I really enjoyed this book. This is another very like magical, story-focused, historical, folklore, kind of fantastical, kind of not story, and it's super creative, and I just really enjoyed it a lot. This is a story that basically centers around the River Thames and a village that lives in and around this river as well. The story opens in a pub. This is a pub known for its stories. People come to hear, tell, and listen to stories that are just like beautifully crafted. So kind of giving you a hint, the story of this book kind of matches the meter of a story told in this pub. But then all of a sudden, a man comes through the door, falls down, passes out, covered in gruesome injuries, and has a young girl that at first appears to be dead, but later comes back to life. So that is the beginning of this tale that starts in the middle of someone else's tale, this story of this girl and this man and what in the world happened, how could they have gotten from point A to point B, and from there you kind of follow a multitude of different perspectives of people touched by this story in different ways. As I kind of described it in my reading vlog, the main thread of the story, the main river of the story is this girl and this man, but then it has offshoots or tributaries to like different sub-stories that are still part of the main story, and you're kind of in the middle of it in that you don't know the beginning, and that's also something that's constantly kind of referred to, that no one really knows where a story begins, but we know where a story ends, and that's definitely kind of reflected within this tale as well. As I mentioned, you follow a multitude of different perspectives. Some people you immediately fall in love with. I got so attached to so many characters so quickly. Like, I will live and die for these characters because they were exceptional. But you also follow a lot of rogues, a lot of bad guys, and throughout this tale people are constantly referring to something is about to happen, but they don't quite know what, and neither do you as a reader. So there's this like anxiety throughout this book as well, because you just want to know what in the world happened, where this book is going to end up, and you have no idea. On top of that though, you also are encountering bad people, but you don't know how they're related to the story. But as things kind of begin to unfurl, and there's kind of like magical, surreal elements to this tale as well that are just perfectly woven in, I loved it so much. So engaging, and I loved the thoughtfulness of how the story was plotted. It was beautiful, and I feel like Diane Setterfield just respects stories so much, and her playfulness of how she kind of integrated like the plot of a story within a story, it was just like captivating. And I really want to read the 13th tale by her, and I just really enjoyed this a lot. It has kind of like a fairy tale quality to it, but it also has like a historical, like this really happened quality to it. And I'm so glad I never unhauled this book and that I finally picked it up this month. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I think my true only criticism for the story is that the ending ended up being a little predictable, which I didn't totally mind because I loved the character so much, but I do wish there was a little more shock factor at the end, which is why I knocked off that half a star. But generally speaking, this book is just lovely, and I would so recommend it. Alrighty guys, those are all the books I read in the month of January. I have a feeling this video is so long, but regardless, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!